Hey everyone, Nils here from Dinghy, a design agency where we always work at the intersection of design, programming, front-end development specifically, user research, all that sort of stuff. And I want to talk to you about something that is probably a common problem that you have in your organization as well. So we have a design here in Figma, and you can see something that's probably very common. Like you have a whole bunch of different UI designed screens over here. They are designed for a mobile viewport. Then you have a couple examples of how that's supposed to look on large screens, but for sure, like what's a large screen? Is an iPad a large screen already, or what constitutes a large screen? So questions that all developers always have when they look at stuff like this is, how do we transition from this screen size to this? Like, at which point exactly will the rounded corners come in? Like, when will the shadow apply? What happens if the screen is not high enough to support this sort of design? Like, there's a million intricate things. And so this is actually a concrete project that we're working on currently. And I just had exactly this sort of issue because the very talented development team working on this project, they just got into the UI part of the thing, and I wanted to help. We had like 3 rounds of discussions going back and forth of questions like, you know, is this shadow always here? Does it only show up when the content is actually bigger than the scroll area? A million things. And I'm sure you had this thing before, so I just wanted to share my approach today. And my approach was to use my skill as a front-end developer that I'm being myself to just close this gap a little bit. And I believe that having an interactive prototype that you can play around with and poke at as the front-end developer, plus seeing the code that has been used to just make the layout and not anything more complicated, like no data fetching, no nothing. It's just about the layout container. Just to have this will help you to implement the real thing. So I went around to look what's the quickest way to make an interactive demo thing. And the thing that I found was that Tailwind CSS, I'm a huge fan of Tailwind CSS. Like, you don't have to be, like, this is not a Tailwind video. It's just like I'm using Tailwind to make this prototype. You can also make something else. But I remember that in Docs and then Playground, that Tailwind has this interactive code pen-like interface. And so that's what I prepared here. What I brought is the individual parts. So we have like an image of a bike, then the logo of the company, like the icons that I'm going to use are already here. And you can see, like, I just put like the minimum HTML that we need to go to bigger, like the desktop version, this screen here, like this one. This is the one that we're building. So what we're going to get in the end, just to jump to the conclusion already, is this thing. So you'll be able to do this with your interactive design that you can then hand off to your developers. They can inspect all the things of how is the scroll behavior, is this bar sticky, like what's the hover effect, what happens when I drag this, like how does the padding appear, like all of that sort of stuff, just to have it. And I want to take you along for the ride to make this today. Also to show a little bit of how easy it is if you possess like some knowledge about CSS to make this sort of thing and just go the extra mile in your developer designer handoff. So let's start here. This is what we have right now. This bike image is just like, you can barely see it. Like, if you make this really wide, you can see I put this in the background just because this product is like a little widget that gets embedded on the product detail page of bicycle related e-com sites. So this is just to understand how the overlay will work, and that it's translucent and blurry. So we have this image there. Other than that, we just have the logo. We have like this icon, that icon. And because on the Tailwind Playground, you can't really upload any files, that's why I have the SVG for the icons and the logo. I have that inlined here. Like you can open this. I'm going to share the link in the description too to the finished product. So like we don't have to see this gnarly stuff. That's why I just closed this up. So yeah, and in this video, I want to take you through the thought process of how to make a layout like this. That's the whole point. Let's start with making an overlay container, I guess. Let's put the bike in the background and let's make like this white box on the grayish background, right? And let's see where we go with this. So on the bike, I suppose, like I'm a huge advocate of using grid. Like it totally helps me with all sorts of stuff. For example, what I love specifically is the place content center. Just like that, you just add grid, place content center, and that's it. And the stuff is in the middle, so that's pretty cool. Then I'm just gonna, add some padding to this. Then the image itself can probably always just be, like the full width of the page, just to make sure that we have this. Also, let's move into a responsive mode here so we can see what's happening. Yeah, so I guess this behaves the way that we want it to. And now we have all of this stuff down here. So let's on our overlay container, like I'm going to close down the content of the overlay container, which is going to be like this header bar, then the actual content and the back and forth navigation buttons. And so in here, just for the purpose of this demo, I'm using divs here. I totally want to encourage you to use the new dialog element. I think that is actually like a perfect fit from a semantic HTML point of view. Read up on that, but I just used divs right here, so I don't have to put any logic to open and close the dialog right now. So let's start with the actual overlay, so the gray blurry background. Let's look at this. In this case, I think we're going to position the whole thing in a fixed way. Then we're going to overlay it to everything. So inset 0 means top, left, right, bottom, everything 0. Then let's give this a background color so we can already see that it's overlaying the content the way that we wanted it to. So let's go with Slate 700, why not? And then we'll just give this like a little bit of a transparency right here so we can see the saddle of the bike is already shining through. Let's add the blurry backdrop. Let's go with the LG, sure. And that is already pretty good for the overlay itself. So the next div that we're going to have here is our white box. So for the white box, I guess we need a white background, because why not? Then also something that I see in the specifics of the design. Let's flip this over to dev mode so we can see what's going on. The maximum width of this white container seems to be 41.25 rem. So you can, in Figma, you can switch over to pixels. So this is 660 pixels. Interesting. But I actually want to keep working in rem so that this responds to people increasing or decreasing their font size. So this is like an accessibility thing. I think I'm going to switch over the breakpoints in Tailwind to the 660 pixels. So let's add like a screens thing here and just gonna call this whatever, MD. And the MD is going to be my 41.25 rem. So that's the only real breakpoint that we need. And this has two upsides now. Because now I can, for example, just say max width of screen MD. And this will now be exactly like the 660 pixels or 41.25 rem that we configured right there. So I can use this as a breakpoint and as a max width, which is pretty cool. Now this, well, this should be in the middle of the overlay. So I'm going to use grid again And I'm going to use the justify item center to center it. I think that works beautifully. Justify item center, sorry, like this. And when you hit save, then they also sort the classes, which I find super hella convenient. Now, guess let's look at this header bar. This one right here. Let's zoom in on this one. So the header bar, I think we can see this has like 3 items going on, of which this is apparently same. It takes up the same space as this one, and then the progress bar is in the middle. So let's focus on this header for a little bit before we go any further. And probably also, let's actually look at this on the mobile screen, because that's what we're going to start with mentally, sort of. You know, like start on the smaller screen. So there's some padding going around here, and then we have this 3-column thing going on. Okay. So let's expand on the header, and let's probably, well, first of all, let's make this close button appear. So currently it's just not here anywhere to be seen. So this is going to be a square thing. And let's just give it like a width. Here it is. Here it showed up. It probably just collapsed in on us because here's the SVG for it, and it just doesn't have like a width or a height. So here, let's give it like maybe an 8, make it a little bit smaller. Then the logo is already expanding to what it is. Let's style the progress bar first. So we have this white number on, you know, like this black progress bar here. The background is a little bit gray. The front end is, the foreground is black. So let's build this out really quickly. So let's start with the background. I suppose the background is going to be like a little bit of a lightish gray. We can already see it coming in there. We want the number, well, we want this to actually be like 70% width. So let's work on this for a little bit. This is an inline element now. So let's turn this, I'll just use grid again. I love grid. We can probably also actually just turn this into like a block level element so we can give it a width. Now we'll just give it like a black background, and the text is going to be white, and the font is going to be bold. That's also cool. And the text is going to be like this super small thing. And now we can give it like a width of 70%. Let's just use Tailwind's arbitrary value selector. So now we can already see that this is at 70% width. Let's put the text in the center as well. So this is on top of that one. Perfect. Then we want this to be rounded. So the edges are rounded, and the container is supposed to be rounded as well. So here we go. Here we have our super easy progress bar. I'm super happy with this. And now the next step is to put this header, well, to have this 3-column layout going on. Like the logo is way too gigantic now, of course. So let's do, I think this column and the last column, they should be the same size, and this can take up whatever is left, sorta. So, and the way I like to look at this is like, there's the logo in here, and that is currently, let's look at this in pixels. So this is 100 pixels wide. All right, so I could see that this can become like a little bit bigger desktop screens. So I'm going to use a little interesting trick here. So first, let's set up our grid. We're also going to give it like a little bit of a gap so that the progress bar and the logo never really touch. And now we're going to define the columns. And the way that we're going to do that is that we're not going to just do the 3. So we could like do this and see it working already. Let's align the items in the center so we can see that this is working already. Like this, I mean, now if we inspect this, we can see we have our 3 columns coming in right here, but the close button is at the very beginning, and that's actually kind of not what we want. So we want the button itself is, I think we want to wrap the button in a little div of itself, just like this. Let's close that gnarly SVG again. And now we can also say grid and then justify items end. So we can see now that the close button is moving all the way to the end. That's exactly what we want. And now, well, now we have 3 even columns. And that is, I think, not what we want, because we can see that the logo is becoming way too big now. So instead of doing the grid calls 3 right here, I'm going to do the square brackets again. Again, you can do this in CSS as well. Like, this is just me using Tailwind. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to define 3 columns, of which 2 are going to have the same width, but are going to be flexible and align to the viewport size a little bit. And the way that you can do that is using the clamp function in CSS. So the smallest that we want the logo to be was 100 pixels. There's the flexible part of this formula. So now we can say in parts of 100. So like, imagine it like being percent of the screen width, how much the logo is going to grow. I mean, it's like, I always eyeball this a little bit. So let's just go like with the 20% of the viewport width. And then the biggest we want it to be is maybe like 140 pixel or something. Maybe something like that. So with this, we should be able to, yes. So you see like this logo is already changing in size when we move down. And I actually kind of like this already. Let's keep it that way for a second. So now we just defined 1 column. We're gonna make another column that is 1FR, that is just the remainder of all of the space, and then our column again. So now we can see that the logo and the close button have the same space. They are occupying the same space, which is also totally what we want. And that's pretty cool. Now I'm just realizing that this should be rounded full. That looks better. So I think now we have the header pretty much looking like what we have going on here. Plus that it, like the progress bar shrinks down and then it sizes up. And I think that is beautiful. That is exactly what we want. I think we can increase the spacing between this a little bit more. So let's close this down. Let's close this down. And then we can just, you know, give it like a bigger gap over here. I think that is very nice. And the logo, I think on smaller screens, it can even be, you know, down to 80. Make sure we do the same change over here too for the second column. So just like that. So the progress bar is always in the middle. Logo shrinks up and down, and I think that's beautiful. So now let's get rid of this gigantic question mark. Like this is way too huge. We're not all the way there yet, but let's close down this huge question mark. That is this one here. Let's just do the same thing as we did on the close button. This can be like an aspect ratio of 1:1, so a square. And then just, I think we gave it like an 8 or yes. So this is a lot better. This is a lot better. Very cool. Now what we have is we have all of this content right here. So this is going to be this list of stuff over here, like these little boxes. And so we have to make those. We have the buttons down here. We want them to be in this floaty bar with the background. And we have the scrolling behavior. But so let's make these boxes look like that. I think that would be cool. So for this, we have list of items, as we can see here. If you're not in static HTML, then, I mean, something that is always a little bit annoying with Tailwind in static HTML land is that if we want to apply something on the LI, then we have to do it, you know, we have to write it 4 times. Thankfully, in this Tailwind playground, you can get like the same multi-cursor thing going on that you could in VS Code, for example, if you work on that. So yeah, This has those things, they are also rounded to a certain degree. Then they have like a border of 2, and then the border color is actually black, so border black. Yeah, they have a bit of padding going on, so maybe 2. Maybe even is bigger. The text is smaller gray, and there's like a little bit of a spacing going on here. So I would say we use our trusted friend grid and add like a little bit of a gap to it. That is very cool. This looks very good already. I think maybe we can move from a rounded MD to an LG. Maybe even XL? Maybe even XL. Let's stick with an XL. So next we're going to go on the H. What I did there was to select one element and then to hit Command D on a Mac. I believe it's probably Control D on Windows, and to select the next matching elements. So you don't have to place your cursor there. We'll make this text be like the bigger one. Maybe this is even like a semi-bold. And then, okay, let's first see how it looks if we make the other text smaller. Then maybe the other one is already big enough. So this can be like the small font size, and then it can also be, like a grayish, maybe even like that. Oh, but this font for the headlines is actually not bold. So let's move back to the semi-bold, get that back out, but say, they call this like the large text, I would say, like I think. Probably better. And then think this gap, like using our Command D trick again. I think like a spacing of 1 is already fine. And then let's space out the elements all together. That's too much. Like let's give it a 2, just like this. And I think that's very nice. Now we have this hover state going on here where we have to inverse everything. So let's just go on the LI again. All the way to the end and say hover, then the background is going to be black, and also hover, the text is going to be white. Let's see what that does. Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful already. Perfect. I think we can also just give it like the, like the cursor pointer, so we get like the little hand thing. And since we're here, we can just give it like a transition of colors, so it does like this smooth animating effect, which is kind of cool. Awesome. Let's save that, close that back down, and let's move into the navigation right here. Nav. So let's look at the nav for a second. So we have that here. The nav has this container with like a little bit of a space between the buttons. They should be equal width. And then there's like this padding going around that has some blurry background too. All right, so let's start with that. Let's give it like a background of white. Make that also 70% in opacity. Backdrop blur, also large. Then let's give this some padding just like that. And since we want the buttons to be next to each other, we can now say that we want 2 grid columns just like that, and also add like a little bit of a space between those. So let's make this more visible by actually defining our buttons. Let's give them like a background of blue and text of white. Text white. Awesome. I think the blue can be a little bit brighter. Yeah, just like that. Then they're also rounded. We had the XL before. Let's stick with that. And yeah, I think they need like a little bit of padding too. That looks pretty much like what we want. Then the back button, of course, is not blue. So let's go back to the blue button and actually get rid of this. Then the text was underlined, just like that. And then maybe let's see if we can give this like a hover effect with like a slightish gray transition of colors too. And we can see, oh yeah, that's coming in beautifully. Let's do hover for the blue one too, so it can become like a little bit darker when you hover over it. Also give it like a transition of color. Like as a front-end developer, I think working at the intersection of UI design and front-end development, it's just so useful to know all of this sort of stuff. Like you don't have to be a full stack developer, but just to know how CSS works. it leaks into how you work in Figma anyway, right? Like on Figma, you have all of this auto layout stuff going on, and essentially this is like how grid and flex works. So you might as well kind of, just understand how it works in browser land too. So then we have this thing up here that should also be spacing out here. Have like a little bit of a gap there, and it's the same font size as this. Okay, so that is this header right here. That is this header right here. So easiest thing to do here is to use flex, center the items, and say justify a space between. Justify between. See, like that way, and the question mark moved over all the way there, and it's super flexible. Like it just stays there all the time. We have to bump up the font size on this one. I think we made it the LG size. Yeah, so that is exactly the same as that one. Perfect. This is starting to look sort of like what we want, I guess. One thing that we have to solve for is that there's this empty white space over here. This doesn't exist here. So what we're going to do for that is let's first of all make sure that the buttons and the header bar are always at the top and at the bottom. And if we look at our overall markup here, then we can see that we have our white container going on right there, and we have 3 elements. This article thing that holds the actual content, that is the stuff that we want to be able to scroll. And if there's not enough space, we want this to go under the header and under the button bar. So for the header and for the nav bar, we're going to make them position sticky. So they can stay here where they are. I think we can then inset them by 0. And in the case of the header, we want bottom to be auto. And so we have left 0, top 0, right 0. Now I'm actually wondering if we need this. Maybe it's enough to say top 0. It seems like it. Let's roll with that one. Let's roll with that one for a second. I'm going to add like the same padding as I did on the button bar right here. Perfect. And then let's say this is going to be bottom 0. Perfect. But now we sort of still have this issue that the buttons are not moving down. And so we can, if we look at this, how this is set out here, then this is our overlay, and then this is our element. And the issue is that up till now, so grid elements by default stretch. And this is what this white container is doing. Like we gave our overlay that's covering the entire area. We gave that class of grid, and we justified the items in the center, but along the y-axis, we didn't tell it to do anything different yet. And that's why this white container is going the entire screen height. So to fix that, we go into our overlay, and where we said justify item center, we're just going to say align item center to. And then we have it like that. And I think that is absolutely awesome. If we do this, then we can actually also just say place items center, which is a shorthand for both. Super nice, I think. Then let's add some padding on the article too, so it doesn't look as gnarly as it does right now. Awesome. And now, since I was also one of the designers working on this, that we want this container to always have like a certain size on desktop, no matter the content. So if you go from screen to screen, that the container doesn't, like jump up and down. Like it's supposed to be the same size. And so I think what we're going to do for our white container is that we're going to say, you're always going to be like as high as the viewport can go, h, and then dvh, like that's the dynamic viewport height. So we always have it going full height right here, but at a maximum of 35.625 rem. Let's see how that goes. So we say max height to our square brackets, and then say, what did we say? 5.6, let's 35 rem. Like, let's not go crazy here. 35 rem. Okay, so For the white container, that's good, but now we have to, well, fix the overflow, I would say. So in here, we're going to say overflow of auto, and that is going to give us scroll capabilities as soon as there's not enough space left. I just love how CSS handles stuff like that. Right, so, and down here, we can actually see that it's sort of doing what we want already. Let's reduce the opacity a little bit so we can, we can see that it's coming on nicely down here. That is cool. Just up here, we have like a little bit of a collision, and that is just because we didn't give the header any background color yet. So let's just grab what we have down here, background white with 40% opacity, and let's also grab the backdrop blur onto the header, save that and scroll up again, and we can see now stuff is going behind the header beautifully. It's going behind the scroll bar beautifully. Like if we close this down just like that, I think this is also super nice. If we don't have enough space anymore, this is exactly what I've been meaning to communicate with the developers too. Like, how is all of this behave? Like, how does this behave, right? Like, you can have two different screen sizes in design, but like what happens in the middle, right? Like what happens in the middle? How is all of these intricate stuff? And it's just so useful as the front-end developer to have like this thing to play with and to see exactly how this is intended to work. So I think this is already pretty cool. Now, there should be like a little bit of a space between these items here, I think. So the way that we can do that, actually we can just give our white box a grid and a gap of 4. Or can we? No, sorry, that's my bad. I think we're talking about the header and the UL content that is inside of the article. So we actually got to move that onto the article right here. And now we have the space coming in. We have the space here. That is awesome. That scrolls with it. And with this, I think the only thing that we have to fix is the rounded corners coming in here. We want them to appear, I suppose, right at our maximum size. So what we can do is that we can just go here and say MD for our breakpoint that we defined custom, and then just give it like a nice roundedness, maybe even bigger like that. So the rounded corners pop in right when it's not touching the screen edges anymore. And I think that is very, very cool. That is super awesome. And with this, we're almost done. Like we have one important design detail that I totally wanted to convey to the devs as well, is that we have this padding on the side going on here. One thing that we could do, of course, is that we could just say our white container. So currently it has like a padding all around, like all of the elements have like a padding of 4. Right? So what we could totally do in our container is we can just say on the MD breakpoint, we just want like a horizontal padding of 20 or whatever. And I mean, this totally does look like what we want. But when we go down in screen size, like you have this jumpy thing going on here. And I don't like this. Like it goes wider than I ever wanted the content to be, and then it can jump back down. And I think that's sort of ugly. So what I think we should do instead is to give the inner content here a maximum width of its own. So this content, 31 point whatever something. Let's try what happens if we give this like a max width of 32 rem. And well, now this is colliding with my max width screen. So yeah, okay. So I think what we have to do to get this effect is to wrap all of this in another div. I'm afraid we have to do it, but I'm willing to just do it and to show you what I mean. So now we got to split up the classes that are responsible for the layout. So this stuff has to stay here. The white 2, I think the overflow of auto, maybe all of that stuff can stay there. And we actually just have to add like the max width of 32 rem onto this thing. Yes. So now, since we are just saying max width, I'm going to put some borders around stuff so you can see what's going on. Border, green, I don't know. Yeah. So I'm going to put like a red border over here, border, just like that. So now, as you can see, they're on top of each other, and that's kind of not what we want. We want the outer one to not collapse in on the inner one, but we want this to be as wide as possible. And that's actually almost what we want. So we can see that this is now shrinking down and the inner one is at the maximum, right? And then this shrinks down if you go even smaller. So actually now we just want this to be in the center. So we can say grid here and then justify center. And then we have it. Then we have it beautifully going on, exactly what I wanted. Like if you're in this, you already get the bigger padding, and then at some point it's enough and you just get like the horizontal padding that we were looking for. Now with this, we can remove our debug borders here, and you can have it just like that. Yeah, I think this is like a very cool way to communicate your design ideas with your developer team, so they understand what you want and how you intended this to work, like with things like scrolling, and does this go under or over, or all of these intricate details that you have going on with this sort of stuff. And yeah, you can just go to the Tailwind playground and do this. You can do this on CodePen or Code Sandbox or wherever you want to do this sort of thing. And then in this case, you can just hit share and you get like a shareable link already. They store it for you. One pro tip, if you want people not to be, like if you just want to share it with stakeholders and they're not supposed to see the code right away, then you can just go in this full screen mode and even add this thing. Then it looks like this, and hit share again. And then you can see that they said like a layout of preview on. And that way people can see the code if they wanted to, but they can also not be totally overwhelmed with this when they come in. And with this, I want to end this video. I hope you liked it. I hope it helped anyone with a similar problem. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to link up this thing in the description. And with this, I want to say thanks and see you in the next one. Bye.